Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Digital Grocer, Season 6, Episode 2. I can't believe we're already at Episode 2. I'm your co-host, Sylvain Perrier, and joining me today is the one and only fresh-eyed Mark Fairhurst.
Well, I wouldn't say fresh-eyed. It's good to be back. I still need these things for reading up close.
You do, yeah. Well, you got laser eye surgery, I think. So that's great.
Just some ocular implants too. So it's like inject Steve Austin theme here.
I love it. Great. So listen, Mark, we have a good show today planned for our audience. You know, it's been no secret, the deeper that we get into retail at Mercatus, you start to realize how the industry really starts to cut across so many aspects of everyone's life. And we experienced that through the pandemic. We're even seeing that more so now, kind of with the macro environment. And the more that we're kind of tuning into local authorities at the municipal level, at the state level, and at the federal level, you start to realize the policy that they're creating can have this massive impact on the food retail industry. I think, recently we just saw a case where the CEO of Loblaws was in front of a parliamentary committee.
Yeah, so our version is the U.S. government. So all the CEOs of the major Canadian grocery retailers are brought in because of the the rise in food prices, and I think those food prices are continuing to remain elevated. And what's even worse is after Galen Weston presented to the committee, then Loblaw announced his pay increase, which politically was probably not the most astute move, especially as consumers. I think there was a report out today that over a third of Canadian consumers believe grocery retailers are taking advantage of the inflationary environment to increase profits.
Yeah, and so what you come to realize is at the end of the day, our retailers have an impact on our communities, and even more so, helping the nation, whether it's Canada or the US, doesn't really matter, is helping them thrive. Now, at Mercatus, we've been fortunate in the last few years. We've joined as a member the California Grocers Association, and we refer to it as CGA. And so just so our listeners understand the juxtaposition of California as a state in the United States, its economy eclipses all of Canada's economy, right? In Canada, we're 37 million, I think. And we actually just added a million more people in the last year, which is great for us because our population is aging. Now, the one thing that once you start to kind of get to know the folks at CGA is not every retailer is created in the same light. You meet members that have one or two stores. You work alongside retailers that have hundreds, if not 1,000 stores across not just California, but the nation. And so how do the smaller retailers that are facing the brunt of the same impact as a large retailer, how do they deal with that? And certainly one case that I can point to is when the California Consumer Protection law came in, the additional privacy legislation. How does a small retailer adapt to that and not know how to get info from a representative in government and so on? Well, along comes the CGA, which is great. Now, to help us learn a little bit more about CGA, its role in the community, we decided to bring in an expert. And his name is Doug Scholz. He's the Senior VP and Chief Operating Officer. Doug, welcome to Digital Grocer.
Thank you, Sylvain. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Well, great to have you. So, let's start off help us understand a little bit about the history of CGA.
Sure. And before I do that, again, thank you for this opportunity to share a little bit about how the sausage is made in the association business and in politics in California specifically. A lot of what I'll talk about is probably very specific to California, but really appreciate and thankful for the opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about my company, CGA. So, yeah, we are celebrating a milestone this year, 125 years. CGA was founded in 1898, which is particularly impressive in California terms because if you consider the real influx of people to California was in 1848 with the gold rush. So, CJ has been around a long, long time. Founded by independent grocers, obviously, that's what was in business here in California during that time. And that really has been the case for many, many years that the independents have been very strong here in California. Obviously, since that time, doing business in California has become more complex, and as a result, the association has kind of needed to evolve with those new challenges. So, one of the things that I talk a lot about and celebrate a lot about CGA is the diversity of our membership, or I'll say the variety, but also diversity of our members. And when you think about California and what that looks like, California spans urban and rural areas across the state. We certainly have very large retailers within our membership, but those single store operators that were the lifeblood of the association are still present and very active. And then obviously every format, whether it's ethnic focused banners or whether it's the natural, organic, or co-op members, we have all those. And then further to kind of think about it, you have the discount channel is present in our membership. The convenience channel is in our membership, as well as Digital First Grocers, which is a new incarnation that are all within our membership. So it's very diverse membership, and we also have a lot of suppliers like yourselves that are service providers to those retailers, large manufacturers, etc. So, and then of course I am not, I won't not pander to my board and say, we also have a fantastic board of directors. It's very large. We have about 55 people that are on our board directors that really help guide the overall mission and kind of purpose of the association. And they're a fantastic group to work with. So
that's true. Yeah, and I appreciate that. I think the one thing from our perspective, Mercatus is headquartered in Toronto, and I always find Canada, not Canada, but California sets the tone a lot from a legislative perspective. I find in retail, specifically grocery retail, that trickles its way eventually to Washington. And so can you give us some examples how CGA advocates for its members?
Yeah, of course. Backing up a little bit, I'll say, obviously there's an association for everything. There's even an association of associations, but not all associations look the same. Their mission, their purpose, their scope, some are very focused on accreditation, if you're talking about some of the like medical or dental associations, things like that. But for us, really, one of our biggest roles in the industry is around advocacy. And it's especially critical in a low margin business like grocery, where laws can have an outsized impact on the viability even of a grocer. And as you pointed out, especially in California, it's certainly a full-time job for us. We employ 6 lobbyists to be able to monitor and engage elected officials at the state level, but also down into the cities across California, which all have various stripes, as I kind of mentioned earlier. So, California gets so much focus and attention, and a lot of people may be curious as to why. I think it goes to what you were talking about. A lot of the issues are they kind of get their start here. It's almost like California has become kind of a proving ground for certain ideas and concepts, and if they prove themselves out, then others that are so inclined will kind of jump on that bandwagon. And the other couple of reasons that California gets a lot of interest within the food industry segment in particular is the outsized opportunity from a business perspective. You mentioned population, 39 million people live in California. If you look at that and compare it across just the United States, 1 of every 8 people live in California that live in the United States, which is pretty crazy. Mm-hmm. If you stack up from a GDP perspective and contribution to GDP perspective, our economy would be the 5th largest in the world, which is pretty crazy. And then, as I mentioned, just the pure geography and scope of the state. It's 800 miles from top to bottom and take you 14 hours to drive it, which is not as long as it probably takes to drive across Canada, but it is a very large state and very diverse geographically, et cetera, from beaches and coast to inland. And then the third point I kind of make in that regard is that people may intuitively know, but California's agricultural production is significant. A third of all U.S. vegetables are grown in California, and 3/4 of the U.S. fruits and vegetables are grown here in California. So, for the food industry, it starts taking on an added dimension that it's not just retailing related advocacy, but it's also farmers and everybody up and down the supply chain.
Yes.
And, if I kind of monologue here a little bit, but the scope of the activity of the legislature is also something that's kind of unique to California. This year, a little over 2,600 bills were introduced. Our legislature meets every year. Not all states have a legislature that meets every year, but that's 2,600 potential new laws being introduced. Last year, 1,000 new laws were signed by the governor, and he only vetoed like 170. So if they make it out of the state legislature and they get to the governor's desk, they have I think that's 86% success rate of being signed into law. So we have to be very active and engaged with those elected officials as they're coming up with ideas that impact the businesses. And I'll also say that I think you can't underestimate the number of those ideas or those bills that impact the grocery industry. If you think about, like I mentioned, anything on the front end of the supply chain around agriculture, but anything to do with employees, because we employ thousands, anything to do with property ownership, that impacts us, food labeling, food handling, packaging, those are all big issues, crime, homelessness, those all impact our guys. So
yeah,
it's a lot.
It's interesting. It's a lot. My impression has always been, watching California from afar, being a technologist, is the world's eyes are consistently on that state. Now, there's been pillars for all eyes. It could be because of the tech sector. I think we know a lot of great ideas have come out of California and proliferated across the globe. Social media being one of them. Quite frankly, creating an entire new industry. Second one, the entertainment industry. But the third is a majority of the goods flowing in from the West actually land in ports in California. And if you're a grocery retailer, my view is that it's a battleground, because everyone wants to have a grocery store or a retail store in California because you access the population, the new ideas that are emerging. And it's got to be a massively fierce battleground. So I appreciate you sharing that perspective. You know, there's one thing that you guys do, and I see this on your website. We talk about it at some of your events. It's this whole continuing education opportunity that's there for industry employees and their children. And it's not something that we see necessarily in some of the other associations out there. I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about that with our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. We love to talk about that aspect of CGA. It's just near and dear to our hearts because it's the opportunity to really kind of give back to our industry and those that are working so hard in our industry. So I'm referring to the CGA Educational Foundation. It was established in 1991, with that mission to give back to CGA members, employees, and their families. It is a separate nonprofit, charitable nonprofit, and separate organization with its own executive director, its own board of trustees, et cetera. But its programs primarily all fall into two and a half categories. So scholarship opportunities, tuition reimbursement opportunities, and then obviously just educational programming that the foundation puts forward. Relative to scholarships, this year the foundation will give out over $800,000 in scholarships to industry employees or their dependents. Yes, I double underline and highlight that one. $800,000 just this year. Last year was over $800,000. It seems to continue to grow. One of the reasons I think it does continue to grow, this program, and also the tuition reimbursement program, is because developing your employees is good business. It adds to retention. It adds to growing the next level of leadership within your company. So our members are very generous in donating the funds to allow employees to continue their education. With tuition reimbursement, this is for employees of these grocery companies that are our members. And an employee who's taking classes, either online classes or in-person classes, that are contributing to a discipline that would help them in their career in grocery, can earn up to $2,400 in reimbursement for those classes in a given year. So that's just free money. So for those that are interested in pursuing their career in grocery, it's a great way to do that for maybe free. So
I think that's great. That is just that's amazing that you guys do that, and I think it's a big advantage. And you're so right. I mean, if you can really contribute to the growth of your employees, you're enriching your culture, you're making your company much better, and quite frankly, at the end of the day, it just pays itself back to the communities where these people reside.
That's right. Yep.
I love it. I love it. Now, we've attended a lot of your events. We recently met up with the team at CGA in San Diego, which is one of my favorite cities in California. And you have a big event coming up in September, which we're really pumped and excited to go to. And maybe you can kind of share with us a little bit more detail of what's happening in that event and so on. And kind of maybe talk about how does it unfold and the opportunities that some of the vendors have to connect with your retail members.
Awesome. Thank you again for the question and the opportunity to talk about that. I think backing up a little bit, I'll tell you that, although advocacy is our primary, it's our headline, it's what we're known for, providing those opportunities for collaboration, whether it's retailer to retailer or whether it's supplier to retailer or retailer to supplier, is really a secondary or 1B mission of the association. As competitive as our members are across the street from each other, when they come to CGA, it's the opportunity, I think, to focus on the common challenges within our industry, or look for ways that we can really kind of collaborate. So the event that you're talking about is one of our two big conferences, the CGA Strategic Conference, which takes place in September in Palm Springs. This year it's September 24th through the 26th. And, it features 3 days of kind of thought-provoking educational content. But the core aspect of that event is pre-scheduled meetings that CGA creates with input from the sponsors and from the retailers. Over the course of 3 days, we typically do around 1,000 meetings, or over two of those 3 days, we do those meetings. So it's a tight, productive, meaningful opportunity to connect with partners and have meetings that further your business objectives, as well as all the social events and other things that kind of make it feel like a community. I think that was one of your impressions the first time you attended, was how intimate and close that event kind of creates that feeling for the attendees.
Yeah, I will say, at Mercatus, between Mark and myself, we attend all the key events in industry and then some. We try to go to the smaller, more niche ones in what I call as secondary markets. The big difference that I find when I go to the CGA event, there's a strong sense of camaraderie in the room, and it's intimate in the sense that it's easy to talk to maybe a vendor that you think you could have a business relationship with, and you can brainstorm something. Or you may have, we have competitors that are in the room, and there's certainly no animosity. So you're talking, to those guys, hey, how's this working? How's that working? But the beauty is everyone is at the same starting line with the appetite and the desire to learn. And that right away creates this openness and transparency, which I think you guys get 10 out of 10. For
Thank you for
100%.
That. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Listen, it's been great having you on the show. And I will say, for any of the vendors that are listening today, if you're not part of the CGA team, you're not a member, go to the website, reach out to Doug and his team, be part of this, because at the end of the day, we're only as good as the relationships we have in industry. And this is the right team to get you on track to doing that.
Yeah, and thank you again for the opportunity. And we have a fantastic team at CGA. Couldn't do all that we do without the 15 or so folks that are pulling hard to support our members. So yay, team.
Yeah, awesome.
Again, thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. Welcome. And Mark, as always, how do people get a hold of us?
Yeah, certainly, Doug. Great discussion around your advocacy, your industry support, and good work. So thank you for that.
Thank you, everyone. We will see you in the next episode.
Thanks for watching and listening to our show. We've got more great episodes on digitalgrocer.com, and we'd love to connect with you on social media at Digital Grocer on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and at digital_grocer on Twitter. Like, subscribe, and click that bell icon so you never miss another Digital Grocer podcast.